Regardless of your opinion on Chris Paul, there's one thing that we can all agree on. He was, by far, the greatest player to come out of the 2005 draft class, and it's not even close. He's a top 10 point guard in NBA history, arguably top 5, honestly. As an individual talent, few players in history can hold a candle to him. However, the perception of CP3 was a lot different prior to the draft, as the skeptics and the critics were quite loud. I searched up some mock drafts from back in the day, and most of them had Paul going in the 3 to 4 range, usually after Marvin Williams. The thing is, Marvin didn't even have a bad career. He reinvented his game as he got older and transitioned into a stretch 4. Playing 15 seasons is impressive, but he obviously did not come close to his expectations. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and in this video, I want to take a look at the reasons behind Marvin getting drafted so high and ahead of CP3, who turned out to be the unequivocal best player of this class. Let's get started. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. If you like the content, drop a sub or a like, and thank you so much for the support. First, we gotta understand how Chris Paul was viewed coming into the draft. In terms of leadership and basketball intelligence, he drew comparisons to the likes of Isaiah Thomas and John Stockton. He displayed those skills at Wake Forest, complemented by a smooth jump shot, an explosive first step, and just a feel for the game that was unseen in a long time. However, the issue was, he was barely 6 feet tall. While he was athletic, there were doubts if he could get to the rim and finish at the basket over NBA-level defenses. Judging by the way most people have seen Paul's playstyle, you might think his athleticism was a hindrance, but it was actually the complete opposite. He was an elite athlete coming into the NBA. It's just that, over the years, starting in 2010, his knee problems and other leg issues sapped his athleticism and forced him to adapt. The fact that he was able to change his game over his career and still sustain his incredible play, that's very impressive in itself. It proves his uncanny knack for the game. His major weakness coming in, according to the scouts, was actually his defensive potential. Being a small point guard who was relatively weak, he should have gotten abused in the NBA by stronger, faster, bigger guards. The Draft Express scouting report had this to say about him back in April of 2005. With his quick hands and dominant lateral quickness, you would expect Paul to be a dominant defender. However, he is mediocre at best in this area. While he ends up with a lot of steals, he isn't always an aggressive defender, and doesn't eat up opposing ball handlers the way he should. Of course, he laughed in the face of those doubters, as he quickly became the league's best defensive point guard for many years. Though the concern for his lack of size was basically the only reason Marvin Williams was taken ahead of him. Unlike Paul, Williams was stronger, taller, and just a burly dude. Physically, his body was more NBA ready compared to Paul. In college, Paul was still far better than Darren, but it didn't matter in the eyes of the scouts. Unless you had a generational impact in the college scene like Allen Iverson did, smaller guys, especially smaller point guards, tend to not get picked first. Andrew Bogut's selection at number 1 shouldn't come as a surprise though. The dude was insane at Utah. He won the Pete Newell Big Man Award and the Naismith College Player of the Year. Although there were debates if Paul and Darren were more skilled and would last longer in the NBA than Bogut, but overall, it was almost a consensus that Bogut would go first. The value of big men was a lot higher back then too. Then there's Marvin Williams. Prior to the 2005 draft, he came fresh off a championship at North Carolina. The thing is, he came off the bench, and despite his talent, he was like the 5th most important player on his own team. Even in his tournament run, he had some good games, but also some games where he looked miserable and non-existent. I guess kinda similar to how his NBA career went. So how did he end up getting drafted so high to begin with? Well, for 2 main reasons. One, the scouts were more focused on his prowess in high school. Originally, in 2004, Marvin was ranked as the 9th best high school recruit in the nation, and the number 1 power forward, and he was named Washington State's Player of the Year. As a senior, he averaged over 28 and 15, over 5 blocks a game too. While he spent 1 year in college and that did help his draft stock, he was still seen somewhat as a high school player. He didn't get much opportunity at North Carolina as his touches were very inconsistent. They had a lot of other scoring options. The second reason why Marvin was selected so high was because just the way he played the game. His absurd skill set and athleticism made everyone think he had the highest ceiling of the entire class. Here are some of the things that pre-draft reports said about him. Marvin has the size, length, versatility, athleticism, and especially the upside that teams love. The most developed part of Marvin's offensive game right now is his almost flawless jump shot. It's a very natural shot, and he shows great form for his size. At 6'9", he handles like a guard and has excellent touch. He displays a low, fast, under-control dribble, and rarely forces the issue. The dude was described like Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant. A taller combo forward with guard-like skills and a smooth, silky shooting stroke. Not just offensively, but defensively, Marvin was incredibly quick and agile. People used to say that he could legitimately play and guard all 5 positions. On top of his already developed skill set, he had all the intangibles. The hustle and the strive to win was all there. He truly had it all. A supposed once-in-a-generation athlete, all in the package of a young 19-year-old. With all this being said, the Hawks had the number 2 pick and drafted him, but it was seen as a weird pick because they desperately needed a point guard. I mean, their starting point guard in the year prior was Tyronn Lue, for crying out loud. Also, in the previous year's draft, the Hawks selected Josh Smith and Josh Childress in the first round, both of whom played similar positions as Marvin Williams. They had Al Harrington as well, who was also a combo forward. So the Hawks' decision to draft Marvin was not based on fit, because they didn't need another forward. But it was based on future potential. They adamantly believed he was the most talented player of the class and the guy with the highest ceiling. Although they did spend a long time thinking about who to draft. There were reports back in the day of the front office going back and forth on their decision, whether to take Marvin or a point guard who they really needed. In addition, Marvin was thought of as being the most risky pick. Out of all players in the top 5, he was the biggest question mark. I don't blame the Hawks for taking this risk. Keep in mind, they also just came off a horrendous season where they won 13 games and were near the bottom of the league in attendance. They were by far the worst team and least exciting team in the NBA, so they needed somebody to bring back some fanfare to Atlanta. With Marvin's flashy style of play, he was supposed to be must-see TV. Of course, as we all know, Marvin's career never took off, while CP3 immediately proved he was a star right when he came in. Their careers diverged right at the start of their rookie seasons. Oh, everyone knew Chris Paul was the real deal, but Marvin? I don't know. There were many games in Atlanta where he'd show flashes of what he's capable of, but it was never on a consistent basis. A 30-point game would be followed by a 5-point game. His story in the NBA is a familiar tale. Guys who are 6'8", 6'9", incredible physical gifts with versatile skill sets, yet they fail to transition to the pros. We've seen it happen so many times, and Marvin was no exception. For him, it was a combination of things that held him back. The Hawks' roster changes over the years affected him greatly. Not only did his role change almost every year, but he played with so many different lineups with terrible floor spacing. The Hawks routinely had guys who would clog up the paint, and Marvin struggled to get to the rim. In most of his time there, he resorted to being basically an inefficient mid-range scorer. Perhaps it's the mentality that also held him back. For a long time, he was content with this role, as the Hawks had brought in many other scoring options over the years. By the time he left Atlanta, the entire world saw him as a bust, but that would slowly change. When Marvin started focusing on his three-point shot and assuming harder defensive tasks, he became a valuable commodity. That's why his career lasted so long. He adapted his game to a changing NBA landscape and thrived in a new era. From 2015 until his retirement in 2020, he became a 38% three-point shooter, a huge improvement considering he barely took any threes prior to that. But it wasn't just his adaptability, there was another reason for his longevity, as stated by sports writer Brad Rowland. Williams didn't stumble into more than 1,000 games, outlasting the vast majority of his draft classmates, simply because he operated as a tremendous locker room presence. Above all else, Williams is known in basketball circles as a fantastic person, and that became even more clear after his retirement announcement became public. Some undoubtedly will not see beyond the draft day decision made by Billy Knight in 2005. That is simply the reality through which a segment of the population views sports, and the Paul-related jokes were flying even in the minutes after word of his retirement broke. You don't play 15 seasons in the NBA by being a scrub. Marvin did not live up to the hype, but he made the most of his career. As for CP3, we all know how this story goes. Right from the get-go, the Hawks regret their decision to choose Marvin. This was their chance to draft the point guard of their future, but because they didn't, that gaping hole at point guard lasted for over a decade. Between the 2005 draft and the arrival of Trae Young in 2018, the Hawks only had one point guard who made an All-Star team during their time here. That was Jeff Teague, who made it when the Hawks won 60 games that one season. I mean, I wouldn't even consider him to be a legit star either. Just imagine how good CP3 would have been alongside prime Joe Johnson and Josh Smith. Whew! Considering how bad the East was during that time, perhaps they could have made the finals a few times. Compared to the West, where CP3 struggled for a long time due to sheer competition. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What if Paul was drafted by the Hawks instead? Do you think they could have given LeBron's Cavs or the Big Three Celtics a run for their money? I think they definitely could have. They had a very strong roster. They just needed a good point guard. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.